When I came back from a business trip, the doorman refused to let me into the building. He handed me a note from my granddaughter that said, "You are no longer part of the family. I am glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment with the city where you are watching to see how far my story has reached." My hands trembled as I reread those words. I looked up at Roger the doorman, who had worked in our building for 15 years, searching his face for any explanation or sign that this was all a terrible mistake. "Mrs. Naomi, I am very sorry," he said softly, avoiding eye contact. "Isabella asked me to give you this." Upon returning, I gripped my suitcase handle tightly, feeling suddenly unsteady. After 30 years in this building, after raising my granddaughter in this very home since she was 7, I was being cast out like a stranger. "Did she say anything else?" I asked in a voice I barely recognized as my own. Roger shook his head, showing clear discomfort. "She just left this note yesterday and said you would understand, but I do not understand." Just 2 weeks before traveling to Chicago for the annual conference, everything seemed fine. Isabella even helped me pack, sitting on my bed like when she was a child, suggesting what clothes I should bring. "Is she upstairs now?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "No, ma'am, I have not seen her today," he replied. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. At 67, I had survived many storms. The early passing of my husband, the car accident that left Isabella an orphan, building a business from nothing while raising a wounded little girl. But this moment, this truly took my breath away. Then I said, "I will go up," as I reached for my keys. Roger shifted uncomfortably and said, "Madam Naomi, I believe the locks have been changed." Suddenly, the lobby felt overwhelmingly bright, far too open. I could sense the curious stares from people near the mail area, watching how the situation unfolded. Mrs. Naomi Fisher, always flawless, now frozen before the door of her own home. "I see," I managed to say. Memories flooded me unexpectedly. Isabella at 8 years old, still having nightmares and crawling into my bed at 12, winning the science fair under my guidance. At 16, rolling her eyes at my old-fashioned advice, yet still seeking it. At 22, returning home after college because it was the wisest choice. "Grandma, when did things change? When did my sweet girl become someone capable of writing those cold words? You are no longer part of the family. Would you like me to call someone for you?" Roger asked gently. I shook my head. Who would I call? Most of my friends were from work. My sister lived across the country. Isabella was the only family I had left. "I will find a hotel," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Could you please call a taxi?" While waiting on the sidewalk, I felt the weight of everything shifting beneath my feet. I checked my phone, scrolling through Isabella's recent messages. There was nothing unusual to be found. The last message was from 4 days ago. It said, "Echo a great final day in the conference. Safe travels home." The taxi arrived and I got in. I gave the driver the address of a nearby hotel. As we pulled away, I looked up toward the 12th floor, my floor, and thought I saw a shadow in the window. Could it have been Isabella? Or maybe Thomas, her boyfriend, whom I never fully trusted? The hotel room felt impersonal, but spotless. I sat down on the edge of the bed, still wearing my travel clothes, and tried calling Isabella. The call went straight to voicemail. I sent a message. "I'm back in town. Got your note. We need to talk, please." There was no reply. Finally, just before midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Isabella read, "There is nothing to discuss. The locks have been changed. Your things are being packed. You can arrange to collect them next week." The idea of my belongings being packed up as if 30 years of life could be boxed and discarded so easily felt surreal. I called immediately. To my shock, Isabella answered, "What is happening? Why are you doing this?" Her voice sounded so cold, so unfamiliar. "You know exactly why, Gran. Or maybe I should not even call you that. You are not real. You are only my mother's stepmother. We don't even share blood." Those words hit me hard like punches in the chest. It was true that I had married her grandfather when her mother was already 10 years old. Yet, he had raised her like a daughter. And when tragedy struck, he had done the same for Isabella. Blood does not make a family. Isabella does. Love does. Care does. 30 years do. "Save your words," she interrupted. "Now I know the whole truth." Thomas helped me see everything clearly. "Thomas, what truth, Isabella? Talk to me. Come by the front desk tomorrow. I will leave a box with your essential things." The call ended. I stayed there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence, unable to sleep. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, I went out to the deserted hotel lobby and asked the receptionist for a sheet of paper. I wrote down everything I could remember from the past months, searching for clues. Any sign of what might have triggered all this? By dawn, I had filled several pages, but was still no closer to understanding. The only constant was Thomas, appearing in Isabella's life about 6 months ago. Thomas, who always asked such precise questions about my business, my investments, my properties. I returned to my building at 9 o'clock, hoping to find Roger. He only seemed relieved to see me. "Mrs. Naomi, I'm very sorry about yesterday." "It's not your fault, Roger, but I need to ask. Have you noticed anything strange lately? People coming and going from my apartment?" He hesitated, then nodded. "A move yesterday and the day before. Large trucks." I felt my blood run cold. A move? Taking what? Everything, I believe. Furniture, paintings, boxes, everything. They had taken it all. I stood at the threshold of what once was my home, gazing at the empty spaces where my life used to be, the old table where Isabella used to do her homework, the blue velvet sofa where we watched movies together, the display cabinet full of treasures collected over many decades. Everything gone. Roger had managed to get me in with the master key to the building. "Anything against the rules? Just 15 minutes, he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder before they returned. I moved through the empty rooms like a ghost. The walls, stripped of photos and paintings, revealed faded rectangles where memories once hung. In the kitchen, even the copper pots that belonged to my mother had vanished. My bedroom was the worst. The mattress remained, but the dresser, the mirror, and the wardrobe had disappeared with the rest. Generations of jewelry, including my wedding ring and the pearl necklace I intended to give Isabella for her 30th birthday, were all gone. I collapsed to the floor, unable to grasp the full extent of what had happened. This was not just a robbery, it was bitterness. My phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "You should not be there. Leave now or we will call the police." Thomas. It had to be him. I ignored it. I forced myself to stand and walk towards Isabella's room. Unlike the rest of the apartment, the 4th floor remained untouched just as it always had been. Her childhood stuffed animals were still neatly arranged on the windowsill seat. The collage of pictures from her university years was still hanging above her desk. That was when I noticed it. A manila folder resting on her bed. Inside were documents I had never seen before. A property deed for my apartment showed my signature granting ownership to Isabella. Bank statements revealed large withdrawals I had never made. A power of attorney that I supposedly signed gave Isabella full control of my assets. My signature appeared on all the papers, but it was not truly mine. It looked similar, yes, but it was not identical. I said, "I understand. Did you find these?" I turned quickly. Isabella was at the door. Behind her was Thomas. "Stop!" His calculated stance, which had always made me uneasy, was clear. His hand rested possessively on Isabella's shoulder. I whispered, "What have you done?" Isabella stepped forward. She looked different, hardened, older than her 27 years. "Nothing that was not already mine," she said, after forging my signature and stealing everything I owned. Thomas chuckled quietly. Stealing sounds so harsh. We prefer to call it an advance inheritance. I stared at Isabella, searching her face for a trace of the girl I raised. Why? I said. I would have given you anything you wanted. It was already in my plans to leave everything to you. Something flickered in her expression, a spark of uncertainty mixed with regret. Yet Thomas squeezed her shoulder and it vanished instantly. We did not want to wait, she said coldly. You already lived your life. Now it is our turn. It is our turn, I repeated aloud, feeling the words resonate emptily within my chest. And what about me? Where am I supposed to go? Thomas shrugged. You have always been very skilled at moving forward. The harsh indifference in his reply left me breathless. Isabella, I said, refusing to accept it. Think carefully about what you are doing. This is not who you are. You do not know me, she snapped angrily. You never did. You were always too caught up in your business, trying to prove something to people who did not even care about you. She gestured towards the empty apartment. All this you collected. For what? To show off how successful you were. Those accusations stung deeply because there was a grain of truth buried inside them. After my husband's passing, I threw myself into work, building a consultancy that eventually flourished. I had neglected Isabella, focusing more on providing financially than being there emotionally. But no, this distorted version of our story was not the one I remembered. The school events I attended, rescheduling appointments, the trips we shared, the late-night talks about our dreams. I admitted my mistakes, but nothing justified this. Thomas checked his watch impatiently. We do not have time for this. The movers will be back in 1 hour to finish the job. I straightened up, discovering within myself a strength I thought I had lost. I am going to call the police, I said. Thomas smiled, one of those smiles that never reaches the eyes. With what proof? Your signature is on every document. The apartment is under Isabella's name. The furniture. You can claim it was always theirs, or that you gifted it to them. It is your word against ours. Who do you think they will believe? Isabella added, speaking to an elderly woman who looked confused, or to her granddaughter who had been taking care of her, taking care of me. Their ridiculous words nearly made me laugh if the situation were not so heartbreaking. You have to leave, Thomas said, moving forward more threateningly. I looked at Isabella one last time. Is this really what you want? She could not meet my gaze. Go now, Grandma. I grabbed the folder full of forged documents, holding it tightly against my chest. I will leave, but this is far from over. As I passed by them, Thomas grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. Drop the folder. No. I held his eyes firmly. You are taking my home, my belongings, even my granddaughter. But this, I said, holding up the folder, this stays with me. For a moment, I thought he might try to take it from me by force, but Isabella placed her hand on his arm. Let her go. It no longer matters. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how fast my heart was beating, the full weight of my reality settling in. Waves of pain hit me relentlessly. I was without a home. Almost all of my belongings were gone. The girl I had raised had betrayed me in the most hurtful way. Roger was waiting anxiously in the lobby. Are you okay, Mrs. Naomi? I was far from okay. I knew I would never be the same again. Still, I managed to nod. Where will you go? He asked. It was the question I had been avoiding. My bank accounts were most likely compromised and the damage had reached deep. My business contacts were out of town. As for friends, I had let most of those connections fade away over the years, choosing work and Isabella instead. I don't know, I confessed. Roger hesitated, then said, "My sister has a small apartment she rents. It is nothing fancy, not at all like what you are used to, but it is clean and in a decent neighborhood." I looked at this man who had seen me come and go for 15 years, who only knew me through a polite nod, a Christmas tip, a brief comment about the weather, and yet here he was, offering help when those closest to me had turned their backs. "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. "I would be very grateful." I followed him outside as he called his sister. Inside me, something shifted. The numbness of shock began to give way to something else, not just pain or betrayal, but a slow burning resolve. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they were wrong. I still had my mind, my determination, and now an unexpected ally. They underestimated me. It would not be the last time. These were the words from Roger's sister's department. I found myself on the 3rd floor of a modest building located in a neighborhood I barely knew. The space was tiny, consisting of a small kitchenette, a living room, a bathroom, and a bedroom, all cramped within less than 60 square meters. The furniture was mismatched, and the carpet showed wear in several spots, yet the place was clean, and at that moment it was all I had. "This is just temporary," assured Maria, Roger's sister, handing me the keys. "Until you get things sorted," she added, as if what I was going through was some simple issue to fix, like a business challenge or a difficult client. But this was my life shattered into unrecognizable fragments. "Thank you," I said, trying to smile, grateful for her kindness. After she left, I sat on the edge of the sagging twin bed and finally allowed myself to break down. The sobs surfaced from a deep and primitive place, while burning tears left tracks on my cheeks. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen, until nothing remained but an empty exhaustion. For 3 days, I barely moved from that bed. I ignored the phone and did not eat. I just stared at the damp stain on the ceiling, replaying over and over every moment with Isabella, searching desperately for signs I might have missed. Warnings I had ignored. I had always been capable of betrayal, just like that. Thomas had simply revealed his true character, or even worse, transformed into someone unrecognizable. The Isabella I knew or thought I knew was kind-driven, sometimes a bit selfish like many young people, but never cruel. She was never calculating. On the 4th day, knocks at the door pulled me out of my stupor. I considered not answering, but the knocks became more persistent. "I am Lucia from apartment 10B. Roger told me where to find you," said Lucia Miller, my neighbor 2 floors below. We were not close, but had shared the elevator and small talk for years. Once I helped her carry her bags when arthritis troubled her. She had watered my plants during a vacation. I opened the door, feeling suddenly self-conscious about my dirty hair and wrinkled clothes. "Oh dear," her face softened with concern. "Look at you." Before I could respond, she stepped inside carrying several grocery bags. "You need to eat," she declared, heading straight to the kitchenette, "and take a bath. No offense, but you look terrible." Her bluntness somehow brought me comfort, not pity, just practical worry. "I'm fine," I said automatically. Lucia sighed as she unpacked the bags. "You are nowhere near fine compared to anyone I've seen, and I'm 72 years old." She handed me a bottle of water. "Drink this, then bathe. I'm going to make soup." Too exhausted to argue, I obeyed. The hot water cleared my mind a bit, and when I came out already dressed in clean clothes from my suitcase, the apartment smelled of chicken soup and freshly baked bread. "Sit down," ordered Lucia, handing me a cracked bowl of soup. I ate and ate, surprised to realize how hungry I was. We ate in silence until my bowl was empty. Without asking, Lucia refilled it. Roger told me what had happened. He finally spoke, at least part of the story. I stared at the soup. My granddaughter stole everything from me, my house, my belongings, my dignity. Saying it out loud made it feel even more unreal. Lucia nodded. My son did something similar to me 5 years ago. I suddenly lifted my head. What? She clarified it was not as dramatic as my case, but convinced her it was dangerous to live alone. For safety, she had to sign over her condominium to him to manage. Before she realized it, she had moved into a nursing home that was just a fancy storage for the elderly. He took her car, her jewelry, her freedom. What did you do? I asked, eager to know. I fought, she said. I simply found a lawyer specializing in elder abuse. I got my condominium back and have not spoken to my son since. Elder abuse. I repeated the bitter words in my mind. Is that what this is? What would you call it? Lucia asked without harshness. I had never seen myself as an elderly person despite being 67 years old. In my mind, I was still the woman who had built a business from scratch. I had raised a son while meeting deadlines and serving clients, someone others relied on, not a person weak to mistreatment. I do not know what to do, I admitted. I do not even know where to begin. You start by not allowing them to destroy you, Lucia said firmly. That is exactly what they want, for you to give up, to vanish quietly. Her words shook me. Was that not exactly what I had been doing these past days? Hiding away, giving in. I need to check my accounts, I said suddenly, reaching for my phone to see what else has been taken. That sounds right, Lucia agreed. While you do that, I have something else to show you. She pulled out her tablet and opened a browser. Look at what your granddaughter has been doing. On the screen appeared a listing on a high-end online marketplace. My breath caught. It was the silver tea set from my mother, passed down through 3 generations. The listing's title read Vintage Sterling Silver Set Family Heirloom. She is selling my belongings, I whispered as I continued to browse other listings. My rare first edition books, the Persian rug from my living room, even my clothes. Designer pieces I had collected over decades. Not for long, Lucia said somberly. I have been taking screenshots, gathering evidence for the first time since reading that heartbreaking note. I felt a sensation other than pain, a small but fierce spark of anger, a spark ignited within my chest. I need my laptop, I said abruptly as I stood up, and my phone charger and some paper. I need to make lists. Naomi smiled. That does sound like a woman with a plan, she said. Not a plan, I corrected. Not yet. I took a deep breath, but I am not going to vanish. I will not make this easy for them. While my phone was charging, I checked the missed calls and messages. Most were from unknown numbers, probably creditors looking for payments on accounts that Isabella had opened under my name. But one name stood out. Margaret Chen, my lawyer. I played her voicemail. No, I have received some troubling documents supposedly authorized by you. Please call me as soon as possible. Relief washed over me. Margaret had noticed something was wrong. I was not completely alone in this. I will call her first thing tomorrow, I told Naomi. She nodded while gathering her things to leave. At the door, she turned back. Remember, Naomi, you are not the first person this has happened to, and you are stronger than you realize. After she left, I stood in the middle of the tiny apartment, taking in my new reality. A borrowed space, a suitcase with clothes, a folder of forged documents. It was not much, but it was a start. For now, that would have to be enough. Fraud against the elderly is one of the most underreported crimes, said Margaret Chen. Her voice was calm, but her sharp eyes behind stylish glasses said a lot. So many victims. They feel too much shame to report it, especially when family is involved. We were sitting in her office with the city skyline visible through large windows. I'd worked with Margaret for 15 years, ever since I first expanded my business. She'd managed my contracts, my taxes, My will, the will that explicitly left everything to Isabella. I am not ashamed, I said. I am furious. Margaret nodded, spreading the forged documents across her desk just as they should be. These are sophisticated forgeries, but they would not withstand expert analysis. She pointed to a power of attorney form and began, I know you would never have signed something like this without consulting me first, so we can recover your apartment and belongings. Her expression became cautious. It is complicated. We could request an emergency court order to prevent further asset sales. We would have to involve the police for forgery charges, but these cases can drag on for months or even years. I don't have years, I whispered. Not even months. I am living in a borrowed apartment with only one suitcase. She understood and leaned forward. But I want you to be realistic about the process. Even with clear evidence of fraud, the courts move slowly. She hesitated a moment and added, There is also the matter of your relationship with Isabella that we need to consider. What relationship? I asked bitterly. She had already made it very clear where we stand. Still, she remains your granddaughter. Are you ready for what that entails? Criminal charges against her. A complete break. I stared out the window, lost in thought. Despite everything, a part of me clung to the Isabella I had raised, the little girl who sobbed in my arms after nightmares, the teenager who helped me understand social media, the young woman who graduated with honors, filling me with immense pride. But that Isabella no longer existed. Maybe she never truly did. I need to be practical, I finally said. I need a place to live, money to get by. If taking legal action is going to take so long, what options do I have? Margaret paused. Perhaps there is another way. You mentioned several antiques and valuable collectibles in the apartment, didn't you? I nodded. Mostly family heirlooms, some worth quite a lot. Do you have any documentation for those items? Insurance papers, appraisals, photographs proving they belong to you. They are in my safety deposit box. As far as I know, they have not been moved yet. She smiled faintly. Good. Here's what we can do. Instead of immediately fighting to recover everything, we build a focused case around certain items with clear proof of ownership. Pieces so distinctive they cannot be easily sold. And then what? We negotiate? Offer to withdraw possible claims. Criminal charges in exchange for a deal. I frowned. Do you want me to let them get away with it? No, Margaret said firmly. I want you to recover as quickly as possible. Sometimes the best revenge is to live well. I was not sure I agreed, but I had to admit her plan was practical. We spent the next hour outlining a strategy. Margaret would handle the initial paperwork and officially reach out to Isabella, while I would focus on rebuilding my financial situation. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a message from Lucia. Do you need anything from the store? I am on my way. My throat tightened. A week ago, I would not have considered Lucia a friend, but now she was a lifeline, mere company. I replied by message. Less than an hour later, we sat at my small kitchen table making lists. That morning, I had checked my bank accounts and confirmed my worst fears. Most of my available funds had been depleted, although my retirement accounts and business investments remained untouched for now. The priority is to generate income, I said aloud. I have to contact my clients and explain that I am facing personal challenges. What exactly is your business? Lucia asked. Management consulting. I specialize in helping companies optimize operations and improve efficiency. I smiled ironically, given the chaos in my personal life. Could you manage working from here? She asked, glancing around the tiny apartment. I considered it for the consultations while the rest could be done remotely, although I would need a proper desk. Lucia nodded with resolve. My nephew works at that office supply warehouse. He can get us a discount on a desk and a chair. Well, so to speak, she said, waving her hand dismissively. "The point is, we will make sure you have what you need by the end of the day. I already had a plan in mind. Reach out to key clients, set up a temporary office, open new bank accounts, protect the assets I still had. Small, manageable steps." That night, exhaustion finally took over. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time since I had returned and found my life turned upside down. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Margaret. Preliminary notice sent to R. Wait. Resistance. Stand firm. I barely had time to process it when my phone rang. It was Isabella's number. My hand froze over the screen. "Do not answer," Lucia advised from the small kitchen while making coffee. She had stayed over, saying the sofa was more comfortable than her own bed. I suspected she was actually keeping watch over me. "I need to know what she wants," I replied and accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Grandma." Isabella's voice sounded hesitant, almost fragile, so different from the coldness she had shown a few days ago. "Yes," I answered, trying to keep a neutral tone. "I had just received an absurd letter from your lawyer. Fraud, theft of property." I gave a quiet laugh, as if it were all just a big misunderstanding. What is really going on? The audacity almost took my breath away. "I believe you fully understand what is happening, Isabella. This concerns the apartment. Look, I know everything happened so quickly, but you always said one day it would be mine. We only moved the timeline a bit forward, forging my signature, emptying my bank accounts, selling my belongings online." My voice remained steady, even though my hands were shaking. A pause followed, then her tone hardened. "Thomas says we do not need to have this conversation. Our lawyers will handle it." "That is what Thomas says," I asked with sudden clarity. "And what about you, Isabella? Do you truly want to be this person? Do not try to manipulate me," she snapped. "You are upset because for once I am thinking about myself. Do you think that is independence? You stole from me, Isabella. You committed a crime. That is not self-reliance. It is a felony." Another longer pause this time. "We have documentation for everything," she said finally, though her voice hinted at a slight doubt. "Forged documentation. Do you really want that to be seen in court?" She did not reply right away. In the background, I could hear Thomas's voice, though I could not make out his words. Then Isabella, covering the phone, whispered, "I will take care of it, grandmother." She returned to the line with a tone of false politeness. "I believe both of us want to avoid unnecessary trouble. Why not get together and discuss this calmly?" I caught Naomi's eyes across the room. She shook her head, warning me that any conversation must happen with our lawyers present. I responded firmly, "All right." Isabella agreed after a brief pause. "Let your lawyer get in touch with ours." After hanging up, I stared at my phone. "She's scared," Lucia remarked, handing me a cup of coffee as I moved closer. "Maybe," I replied, "or perhaps she is just reconsidering her options." Later that day, as I set up my new laptop on a box serving as an improvised desk, a message appeared from an unknown number. "I am Thomas. You are making a mistake. Back off now, or we will make your memory problems public. Who do you think people will believe? An elderly woman confused, or her worried granddaughter? Think carefully." I showed the text to Lucia, who had declared herself my assistant, helping me organize receipts and catalog what had been stolen from me. "The man was charming," she said. "I suppose you'll keep that message," she added. "Of course," I said, forwarding it to Margaret. "Every threat only makes our case stronger." For the first time, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I lost my home, but not my sanity. I had not lost my will to fight. And now I had a plan. The coffee was my choice, a neutral public place halfway between my temporary apartment and what once was my home. I arrived 20 minutes early and settled at a table in the corner where I could watch both entrances. I ordered a tea that I never ended up touching. Margaret took a seat beside me, flawless in a dark gray suit, with documents neatly arranged inside a leather folder with precision. "Remember," she whispered, "we are not here to negotiate everything. Only the items with undeniable proof of ownership." I nodded, keeping my gaze fixed on the door. It had been a week since Isabella's call, a week filled with careful preparations. I secured the assets I still held, contacted my most important clients, and even managed to get a small consulting job through a video call. Holding on to routine was like a balm, a reminder that although much had been taken from me, my mind and skills remained strong. "Here they come," Margaret whispered. Isabella entered first, scanning the cafe until she spotted me. She wore a cream-colored dress I had personally given her for her college graduation, her hair tightly pulled back. Thomas followed her, dressed in an expensive suit, contrasting with his usual self-assured expression. Behind them walked a man around 50, carrying a briefcase, likely their lawyer. As they approached, I studied my granddaughter's face, searching for something: remorse, shame, even anger. I found nothing but an expression of neutrality, carefully crafted, a mask I had never seen her wear before. "Grandma," she said with professional politeness upon reaching our table. No cheek kiss, no genuine gesture acknowledging our bond, just a meeting between opponents. Isabella replied just as formally. We exchanged introductions. Her lawyer was Alan Peterson, a divorce expert who seemed somewhat uneasy about the situation. An odd choice, I thought. Not a fraud specialist or a criminal defender, but someone used to dividing assets. "Let's get straight to the point," Thomas said impatiently. "We have reviewed your claims," he uttered the word as if it were absurd. "We are willing to propose a settlement." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe we have presented our demands yet." "We are being proactive," Peterson interjected softly. "Miss Fisher has an emotional attachment to certain items. We are ready to return some of them as a gesture of goodwill." "Some," I echoed, referring to my own belongings. Isabella shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The apartment was already in the process of being transferred to my name. "You said that yourself several times." "The process," I emphasized, meeting her gaze. "With the proper legal paperwork, not through forged signatures." Thomas leaned forward. "Allegedly forged." "Your memory hasn't been the best lately, right, Grandma?" Margaret placed a hand on my arm to calm me down. She slid a document across the table. "We have prepared a comprehensive inventory of items with undeniable proof of ownership, including bank records, insurance policies, certificates of origin, and dated photographs spanning decades." Roger reviewed the list, his face clearly showing concern. He leaned towards Isabella to whisper something. At that moment, my granddaughter's mask finally cracked, revealing a flicker of unease. "We have also documented online sales for several of these items," Naomi continued, handing them copies of the listings that Lucia had been tracking. The pearl necklace that belonged to Mrs. Fisher's mother, a first edition of Hemingway, the Persian carpet valued at $22,000. Thomas chuckled softly. "Isabella's grandmother gave you those things." "Really?" Naomi asked gently. "Then I suppose you won't mind explaining everything to the police. We've already submitted a preliminary report." The word police fell like a stone in calm water, sending waves of tension rippling across the table. Isabella's face went pale and Thomas's jaw clenched tightly. Even Roger shifted uncomfortably. "This is not necessary," Isabella said, her voice a little louder than usual. "We can settle this within the family." The audacity of her remark almost took my breath away. "Family," I repeated. "That is what we are, Isabella. After what you have done, for the first time." She could no longer meet my gaze. "You do not understand. It was never meant to unfold this way." "Then please explain it to me," I said, leaning towards her. Help me grasp how my granddaughter, whom I raised and loved with all my heart, could do something like this to me. Thomas interrupted sharply. This is getting us nowhere. We are here to discuss terms, not emotions. But something had shattered in Isabella's carefully maintained composure. You were planning to sell the apartment, she blurted out suddenly. Thomas had seen the emails from the real estate agent. I blinked in confusion. What emails on your laptop about cutting costs, selling the apartment, moving to a retirement community in Arizona? Understanding dawned on me slowly. Isabella was exploring those options for Lucia's mother as a favor. I never intended to sell our home. A flicker of doubt passed over her face. But Thomas said, I whispered. Thomas told you exactly what you needed to hear to justify what you were already doing. Thomas's expression hardened. This is absurd. We are leaving. He stood up abruptly. Please, Mr. Harris, sat Margaret with a tone both kind and firm, unless you prefer to explain it to the detective who is waiting for my call. She tapped her phone deliberately. Reluctantly and slowly, he sat back down. Peterson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should first discuss the specific terms of an agreement, I said, keeping my eyes fixed on Isabella. I want the truth, all of it. Silence stretched between us, tense like a taut wire. Then, almost without being noticed, Isabella nodded. Everything began about 6 months ago. It started off difficult when Thomas and I got engaged. Thomas moved as if to interrupt, but Peterson stopped him with a sharp look. We wanted to buy a house, but we could not afford the down payment, Isabella went on. Thomas suggested borrowing from you, but I knew you would ask questions about his finances and his businesses that never seemed to do well. I felt as if my heart was breaking. Money, the most crude motivation. Then she discovered those emails about selling properties in retirement communities. She convinced me that you were planning to leave and start over somewhere else, that everything I believed I would inherit would vanish. Her voice wavered. She said we should take what was rightfully mine before you changed your mind. I looked at Thomas, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a mastermind, but an opportunist. A man who found a weakness in my granddaughter and exploited it mercilessly. And the forgeries? I asked. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. Thomas knew someone. Peterson frowned clearly. So you emptied my house, I said softly. You sold my belongings. You left me with nothing but a note. Tears began to flow. Now, I am sorry, she whispered. I did not think. I never thought. That's it, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You never thought about me at all. 1 year later, I was standing in my new kitchen with the morning light streaming through the windows. Not a city street, but a small garden filled the scene. The scent of freshly brewed coffee hung in the air as I arranged some rolls on a tray. Naomi would arrive any moment now for our weekly breakfast ritual. Life had adopted a different tempo, slower perhaps, but steadier and more deliberate. The legal agreement had been finalized 6 months ago. In the end, I did not recover everything. Some belongings had been sold, and tracking them was impossible. The apartment held too many painful memories to return to. Instead, I accepted financial compensation along with the return of my most cherished possessions. My mother's jewelry, family photographs, personal documents, and a few antique pieces of furniture that carried deep sentimental value. The rest I released. With the settlement money and my retirement savings, I bought this small house in a peaceful neighborhood. It had 2 bedrooms, a study to continue my consulting work, and a garden I had always dreamed of but never had time to tend to. Not lavish, but entirely my own, without compromises. Suddenly the doorbell rang, and I smiled upon hearing Naomi's voice calling through the mailbox slot. She had better bring those almond croissants in her little gnome basket. I opened the door to find her holding a pot of violets, her latest attempt to bring life to my garden. "Happy anniversary in your home," she said. "A year in your fortress of solitude, barely lonely when you're with yourself." Breaking in 3 times a week, I joked as I accepted the plant. We settled at the kitchen table, slipping into our comfortable routine of coffee, pastries, and conversation. Naomi had become more than just a neighbor or a friend. She was family, now the kind you choose, not the one fate hands you through blood ties. "Any news?" she asked, pretending casualness, though we both knew exactly what she meant. I nodded. Yesterday, another letter arrived. Isabella had been writing to me for months, starting with shy apologies, then longer letters sharing her life, her struggles and efforts to make things right. She had broken off her engagement with Thomas. After the separation, she moved to another state, began therapy, and found a job. Small steps to rebuild her life far from the ruins she had left behind. I hadn't replied to any of her letters. "You still not going to answer her this time?" Naomi asked. I took a thoughtful sip of coffee. "I'm considering it." The doorbell rang again, interrupting our talk. I wasn't expecting visitors since the agreement until a restraining order put an end to those surprises. "I'll get it," Naomi said, standing up before I could object. I heard soft voices in the hallway. Then Naomi returned wearing an unreadable expression. "It's Isabella." My heart skipped a beat. Now Naomi nodded. "Want me to send her away?" I took a deep breath, looking for steadiness inside myself. "I will not see her." Isabella stood at the threshold, hesitant, with a presence both familiar and strange at once. Her hair was shorter and her clothing simpler compared to the designer outfits she usually wore. She held a small package wrapped in brown craft paper. "Roger," she said softly. "Sorry for showing up unannounced. I was going to leave this on the porch, but I ended up coming inside." I was taken aback by the steadiness of my own voice. Lucia squeezed my shoulder gently. "I will be in the garden if you need me," she murmured as she slipped away alongside Isabella, her gaze sharp and attentive. We sat facing each other at the kitchen table. The silence between us felt heavy. Isabella placed the package between us but did not bring it closer. "Your home is beautiful," she finally said. "It suits you perfectly." I smiled, gesturing toward the package. "What is this?" Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid the parcel toward me. "It is something I found after everything. It had fallen behind a drawer in the apartment." I carefully unwrapped the paper. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook I recognized immediately. It was my grandmother's recipe journal filled with handwritten notes and culinary wisdom spanning 3 generations. I had believed it was lost forever. "I remembered how much this meant to you," Isabella said, watching my face. "How you used to read it to me when I was little, sharing stories about great-grandmother Elisa." A lump formed in my throat as I opened the journal, discovering inside a drawing made decades ago with crayons, a child's depiction of 2 stick figures labeled as me and grandmother. Standing next to what looked like a cake, I asked, surprised, "Did you keep this?" "It was our very first recipe together," murmured Isabella. "My 7th birthday chocolate cake filled with raspberry." The memory came back clear. Flour dusting Isabella's small nose, her serious focus, as she measured the sugar carefully. The pride shining in her eyes when the cake was finally out of the oven. It had been just a few months after her mother passed away, one of the first times she managed to smile again truly. I gently closed the journal. "Why are you here, Isabella?" "Really?" She held my gaze without blinking, something she had never done, not at the reconciliation meeting, nor in any of her letters. "To see you. To tell you in person how deeply sorry I am, although I know it doesn't fix anything." She paused. "And to ask you if maybe someday we could find a way to move forward." "Forward," I repeated, "not backward." She nodded firmly, "Not backward." "I know we can't go back." I studied her face, searching for any traces of the manipulation I had seen at the cafe a year ago. Instead, I discovered something more complex, genuine remorse, yes, but also acceptance. She wasn't expecting forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I have spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, I finally said, and why it happened. I betrayed you, she said bluntly. There is no excuse. I didn't agree with it. There isn't one, but there are reasons, things I have come to understand about both of us. I stood up from the table. I approached the window, watching Lucia tending to her newly planted violets. After your mother passed away, I focused intensely on providing stability and security, making sure you never face the financial uncertainty I experienced while growing up. I turned to her, but in doing so, perhaps I taught you that possessions, money, and status were most important. That is not your fault, grandmother. It was my choice. My mistake, maybe. Still, I wonder if I could have done better, been more emotionally available, not just concerned with material things. Isabella's eyes welled up with tears. You were always there when it mattered most, until I was not, I whispered. When you needed guidance about Thomas, about your future, she shook her head firmly. She did not want advice. She wanted what she wanted, no matter the consequences. I returned to the table carrying the recipe journal. I said honestly, I am not ready to forgive completely. Maybe I never will be, but I also do not want to keep holding on to resentment. What does that mean? She asked, hope and caution battling in her expression. It means I will answer your next letter, I said, and we will see where that takes us. It was not a great reconciliation, not even a promise. Just a small opening, a crack in a door I thought was sealed forever. Isabella nodded, understanding this simple gift held a special weight. I should go, she said as she stood up. Thank you for welcoming me. When I reached the door, I paused for a moment. Is your friend, Lucia, very protective of you? Yes. I nodded. That is what real family does. After she left, Lucia came back to the kitchen with me. So, how is it going? She asked, glancing at the recipe book on the table. Small steps, I replied. She smiled approvingly. Good. Small steps are the ones that last. Later that night, after Lucia had already gone home, I sat in the garden watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of pink and gold. My new life was not perfect. Some parts remained raw wounds, still healing. But it was mine, rebuilt from the ground up, stronger in some ways precisely because it had been shattered. I opened my grandmother's diary to a blank page at the end and started to write not recipes, but reflections on loss and recovery, about the family we choose, the slow and careful work of rebuilding. The house behind me was smaller than my old apartment. My circle had shrunk and then expanded toward new paths. My relationship with Isabella, if it ever truly healed, would be something entirely different than before. More cautious, more aware. But as I wrote under the fading light, I realized that perhaps this new life, this reconstructed existence, was not a lesser version at all. What was taken from me was more than just belongings. It felt completely different, more deliberate and more genuine. For now, that was enough. The betrayal I endured not only stripped my home of familiar furniture and walls, but also exposed my soul, shattering illusions and certainties I believed were unbreakable. When I was left with nothing, I realized the most important things were not what was stolen, but what could not be taken away. My dignity, my strength, and my ability to start over remained intact. The lesson life forced me to learn through its harsh hand is simple. Blood does not define family. Actions do. True loved ones do not wish for your downfall. They are the ones who offer a helping hand when everyone else turns their back. Now, I understand that a person's worth is not measured by what they possess, but by how they rise after losing everything. Rebuilding after loss, though painful, can be the purest act of self-love. If there is one thing I want to tell you, it is this. Do not fear losing everything if it means reclaiming your truth. Do not hold on to someone who betrays you merely because they share your blood. Instead, hold on to those who respect you, defend you, and walk beside you even if you owe them nothing. Now I want to ask you, reading from your corner of the world, if you were in my place, if your home, your story, and the person you loved most were taken away, and that person rejected you cruelly, what would you do? Would you fight to the very end, or choose to let go and begin again? I listen to you here from this modest home I have built, using the remnants of what was lost and the bricks made from my determination.